Hi y'all, Jeff here with Jeff's Cars and welcome back. And as you see by the background, I am now back in Nebraska, and as you saw in the last video, or some of you probably saw, drove the GL350 down to Baton Rouge. Had a death in the family. In fact, my wife is still down there, so I will probably be headed back there at some point, maybe to pick her up, or I'll fly her home, however it works out. Kind of impeding in my, the project of my of her. We're going to call it her 350 SL. But I've had trouble with this GL350. At the first when I got it, if you go back to the videos, and you'll hear about the clattering noise and what it took to spin on it to get it fixed and things like that. Well, I'm going to review the car now after driving it 2,100 miles in 4 days. Yes, folks, that's right. 2,100 miles in 4 days. My wife and I and my two daughters, twin daughters, left the Omaha area about 3:30-ish Thursday afternoon. We arrived in Baton Rouge at 7 a.m. the next morning on Friday. We drove all night. I drove all night. And then slept and, kind of caught our breath and whatnot. And then I did the video, as you saw, with the 190, which incidentally is for sale. And, I did get one email, asking what the actual asking price is. Well, the actual asking price on that, I think, is a fair offer, or a fair price, but it's negotiable, is $8,000. That's what my father-in-law would like to have out of the car. Partly, I know, because he spent about $5,500 on the paint job, but be that as it may, it is still a collectible car. But aside from that, that's the asking price of the 190E, the 1993 190E. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're going to talk about my review of this GL350 Bluetec Diesel, and the reason I really did want the diesel version of this, and and why I kind of like, really why I like this car. I think it's probably a little underrated, except for some of the problems and the reliability issues. But with that said, first of all, comfortable to drive. I could go probably 5, 6, 7 hours, and I'm in my 60s. I can go 5, 6, 7 hours and not have any fatigue. Now, I wear a wallet in my pocket, and so I have to take the wallet out, because the way the seats are made with the side bolsters coming up, wearing a wallet in your back pocket, that's a little uncomfortable over time. But comfort-wise, very, very good. In fact, everybody, my wife and daughters both said that while riding in the car, the seats are soft and comfortable. There was a little lacking of leg room in the back seat, especially for folks my height. And we're talking, I've got Madison is the shorter of the twins, but my wife said, she could sprawl out and a little bit in the center, but the F-150 in the rear seat, other than the seat is uncomfortable in the back seat, it had a lot of leg room to really stretch out there and really have some, have the space. It's a good and a bad. Cushioned, comfortable seats, a little lacking in leg room. The front passengers were fine. Storage in the back area, plenty of storage. All four of us. My wife had a big full-size suitcase, while the rest of us had smaller suitcases or duffel bags, and really worked out great. I still could see over the top of them going down. And then, of course, we acquired a few things. My daughters and I acquired a few things coming before we came back, kind of filled it up a little more, but I could still see back there. One negative that happened on the trip was we were looking for the first aid kit, because I had to show everybody in my father-in-law's Mercedes, the first aid kit, the original first aid kit in the back deck was still there. And so we were looking to find the first aid kit here. We never found it, but we disrupted something, and I had a warning come on the dash that the third row seats weren't locked down. Well, since I've gotten home, I put them up, put them back down, warning light went away. I couldn't do that with stuff in the back seat. So that was the only negative on the entire trip. So the mechanical work that we did early on with the timing chain tensioner actually worked, and the vehicle performed well. Now for the nuts and bolts of things. The total trip was 2,100 miles. According to the dash, the entire trip averaged 24.7 miles per gallon. Folks, where in the world are you going to get a full-size luxury SUV, all-wheel drive, that's going to average 24.7 miles per gallon on a road trip? Constant. It was the whole trip. That's the entire trip, 2,100 miles. Now, diesel fuel. In Iowa it's a little more expensive than it is in Nebraska. Missouri is a whole lot cheaper than Arkansas, and then Louisiana was all over the place. Down there, they do not have where every station is competitive. So, but when you get on those those gas apps and things like that, you can look for where the prices are and get the best price. So my daughters were kind of helping me when we were driving down there, looking for the best place to get fuel and where we could end up cheaper. So when we left here, I filled up, and I used an app that I had some fuel points on, but I didn't get it completely full, but I think it topped out at $50, I think is what it was, or 20 gallons. That's what we topped it off at when we left. So it wasn't completely there, and then I had to take my wife to a doctor's appointment, and we did all that before we even left. And so I wasn't completely topped off full, but it still showed up at about 590 some range miles on the dash. Well, that's pretty awesome when you get to thinking about it. But who could sit in a who could sit in a car for 590 miles straight? Well, we almost did. So with looking at the app, we found that in southern Missouri on our route down had probably some of the lesser expensive diesel. So that's where we filled. But it still was over $3 a gallon. It was $3.11, $3.09, $3.13, somewhere in that range. And but I wouldn't let the gas gauge get below, or gas gauge, the fuel gauge below a quarter of a tank. So by the way, when I filled the first time, the fuel gauge was just below a quarter of a tank, and when I returned last night, the fuel gauge was just under a half. So I didn't get I ended up with more fuel when I returned than when I left. So I still could have gone a few more miles. But the average, or the total I spent on fuel, and I added up my receipts, was $265 and change. I think it was 50 cents actually, come to think about it. And that equated to 85 gallons. That's all I used, was 85 gallons for 2,100 miles. Now, let's compare that to its counterpart, the GL 450 or 550 in the gas version. EPA says they get 17 miles to the gallon, or they're supposed to, or roughly. That's what they're rated at. They may be a little bit more now, but let's go for the year for year. Okay, this one in the 2015 era, they averaged about 17 miles to the gallon on the highway. Now keep in mind, this was all interstate highway driving, average speed 65 miles an hour, the entire trip. by the way. So first, let's compare this if I drove my F-150. And let me get the camera here and remind you of my F-150. See, F-150 sitting right over there. All right. If I were to have driven that, it averages 17.5 miles per gallon on the highway. Based on that, I would have used or burned 120 gallons of fuel. Now, gasoline in Missouri is cheaper, in Arkansas is cheaper, and in Louisiana is cheaper. And so I kind of averaged that out. I saw some 239, E10 gas. I saw some, actually, there was one station I saw along the way, it was 229. But the average, pretty much the entire trip was right around 250, 252. I would have spent $302.50. Now, let's go back. I spent $265 on diesel. Oh, and the average price of the diesel is right around $309, $311 a gallon. Okay? So more per gallon, less out of pocket. Compare the GL 450. It gets about the same fuel economy as the F-150. Right around, it's rated at 17.5 miles a gallon. But you don't put regular gas in the GL 450. It actually requires you to put premium. Oh, but premium, the average price along the way was right around $3.09 a gallon. I would have spent $370 for the GL 450 in the gas version of this same model. So let's see how that works out. I would have spent $105 more in fuel to make a 2,100 mile trip by having a gas version. Interesting, folks. Now let's talk about one other thing, because this came as a conversation with my daughters and I as we were driving down there. Are you a fan of electric vehicles, EVs? I'm not, because guess what? What would the range on an EV, an average range on an EV is what? 350 miles, let's say we had to test the Tesla SUV. 350 miles, 330 miles, what is it? Oh, I don't know what it is. I don't follow EVs. I don't really look at them. I'd had to stop twice to do a quick charge and sit there for what? An hour, hour and a half for a rapid charge? What would each charge cost going down? I don't know. You tell me. I'm thinking it's probably around $65, maybe $55, maybe $85. I don't know. I don't have an electric vehicle, so I don't know what it costs to charge one while you're en route on the interstate. But the way I kind of calculated it, I'm guessing I'd have had to recharge twice at, let's just say, $65. That's $130 to get down there and $130 to get back. So that's $260. I would have probably spent about the same, but that's a car. I didn't have the cargo space. Probably had the comfort. The charge could have been more. I don't know. I mean, that's the unknown because I'm not in that world. Personally, to me, I like this idea. I like the diesel idea. And that's kind of the reason I bought that, was to kind of test the theory as to if I could get a full-size vehicle in a diesel and run it and drive it as it was intended. I mean, this thing barely even shut off the trip down and the trip back. I mean, it ran. And it was quiet and comfortable. I couldn't tell. I mean, you had a little bit of the engine roar when you climbed up the hills in Arkansas, but that was it. I mean, we set the cruise at 70, 75, whatever the speed limit was, and we only went 4 to 5 over the whole way down. So I wasn't pushing it to death. It wasn't hard on it. So you tell me. I'm glad I was able to do that and put this thing to the test. because I get the next time I might be actually towing a vehicle. I want to thank you for watching, and I hope this information was valuable. And if you miss any of the other videos, it is in the playlist with the GL450. Go back and watch them, because you're going to find this vehicle being a little interesting. And now it's ready for its oil change. I've put 3,000 miles on it. Although it's a 7,500 mile oil change vehicle, I'm going to get it changed at 35, right at the 3,500 mile mark. Because we went through the whole, changing the oil to do the belt or the timing chain tensioner, and want to remagnetize the oil just to make sure there isn't anything adverse down in the oil pan. And then I can virtually say that I think I'm happy with this car, this vehicle. So put your comments down below. Thanks for watching. If you have any new suggestions of anything that hopefully maybe someday I'll test, I may actually look for an S-Class sedan in this era that also has the diesel, just to see, because they were rated in the 30 mile to the gallon range. Now it's a car, so it's not going to have the cargo room, or it may have more comfort. So we'll see. Maybe I'll end up with one of these days. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Hope you like it. Put your comments down below. Subscribe if you haven't. Share this with your friends. Have a great day.